Hey guys, welcome back to Intelligent Faith 315. This is Pastor Jay, so good to be with you today. Today we're continuing on with part 3 of our second lesson, the War of the Worldviews. This is our foundational apologetics class, Reason to Believe, and we're on lesson number 2, the War of the Worldviews, part 3. Do encourage you quickly to go check out iTunes. The same title here, Reason to Believe. We have about a 25 episode podcast there. It's growing on a weekly basis. I encourage you to download that podcast at iTunes, Reason to Believe. If you're on YouTube, go over to intelligentfaith315.com and check out our mother website. We have articles, videos, links, and just a lot of good resources to help you understand and grow in the evidence and the proof of the Christian worldview and faith. And if you are on our website, go to YouTube. You can check out all of our video content at one glance. Just type in Intelligent Faith 315. It'll all come up for you. As I said, we're continuing on with part 3 of our lesson, the War of the Worldviews. We've discussed in the first 2 parts of this lesson how important it is to understand what a worldview is and to, in a sense, think worldviewishly. So a worldview, as we defined it, is an intellectual way of looking at the world, an intellectual framework that you have, and you see everything in life, everything in reality through this framework. It's like a set of mental glasses that you wear, and just as if you wore red glasses, everything in your world will be colored red. Depending on your worldview, everything you see, whether it's something on TV, the movies, things according to ethics or law, or anything at all really is colored, and it's going to be connected to your worldview. So one of the most important things to realize about yourself and everyone you talk to is everybody has a worldview. Everybody has a philosophy. Everybody has an intellectual way of looking at reality. The only question is it a good worldview or a bad worldview? Is it a strong one or is it a weak one? Is it a worldview that's been carefully thought through and planned out and can be expressed and articulated? Or is it a worldview that has not really been developed or strengthened or really thought through by the person? So again, I encourage you, as you speak with people, find out what their worldview is, and if you understand that worldview, then you'll know how to begin to address them and speak to them. And if you're a Christian watching this, of course, reach them for Christ and turn them from these weaker worldviews to the Christian worldview, which really is the strongest and most robust. We talked about there's 7 worldviews: theism, deism, finite godism, atheism, pantheism, panentheism, and polytheism. So any philosophy, any world religion that you know of or will come across in the future could really be categorized in one of these 7 major worldviews. So I do encourage you to get a good grasp on what they are, and then again, you'll be able to converse and dialogue with people really effectively. So let me just fast forward. We went through theism, we went through deism, that God is beyond the world but not in it, and of course, theism is that God created all. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism hold to theism. Deism, as represented by Albert Einstein, believes that God is beyond the world, but he's not in it. No supernatural acts are possible. God is impersonal. Finite godism, God is beyond the world, but he is limited in power or perfection. So just one kind of small, finite God. We talked about atheism. Of course, there is no God at all. Pantheism, that God is all and God is all and all is God, represented by the famous pop culture icon Master Yoda, because Buddhism and Hinduism represent this type of a worldview. Panentheism, God is in all, and this is shown here to be represented by Gaia, kind of the Mother Earth, the Earth Goddess kind of a spirit. Polytheism, there are many finite gods, represented by Thor, who is just one of many finite, limited gods, like the Roman pantheon, the Greek pantheon, or the Viking Norse pantheon of finite gods. And then we ended last time by comparing the 3 major worldviews. Theism, which is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Pantheism, which would be Hinduism, New Age, and some other Eastern religions. And then atheism, which would be secular humanism, naturalism, materialism, physicalism, or scientism. And we compared in our last video, part 2, encourage you to watch that, the different perspectives that these 3 major worldviews have on such issues as God's existence, matter, is God personal or knowable, what do they believe about logic, morality, and evil, and the existence of minds. So again, most people you talk to, out of those 7 worldviews, these are the 3 most common worldviews. Most folks you talk to are probably going to fit into one of these 2 categories. So really do encourage you to understand what they are and how to speak to them. And now, in our last part, we're going to compare theism with each of the 7 worldviews and see how they stack up with each other. So let's do that. Theism versus deism. In theism, of course, God is beyond the world, but he's also in the world. He's transcendent, but also immanent, sustaining the world. And in deism, God is beyond the world, but not in the world. Here's a problem. In deism, God did the big miracle, creation, but not the smaller ones, like resurrection. So this does seem to be kind of an intellectual, philosophical problem with deism. They believe that God created the universe, which is really the biggest miracle that we know of physically, but he cannot do the smaller ones. That's kind of a problem, a little bit of a contradiction there within deism. Versus finite godism. In theism, of course, God is infinite, but in finite godism, God is finite. Problem. This is contrary to the principle of causality, that every effect needs a cause, that nothing cannot be produced by nothing, that something must produce something else. Contrary to the principle of causality, that every finite being needs a cause. So in other words, God would need a cause, in which case he wouldn't be God, but he would be a creature. And so, in other words, this has another philosophical intellectual problem, because that finite God would himself need a cause. And this would then create what they call an infinite regress. It would go back, 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 and ultimately, the ultimate cause of everything else, that really should be labeled God. So this finite God really wouldn't be any kind of a God at all. And again, as it says here, this is contrary to the principle of causality. So that's kind of a problem with finite godism. Also, there's another problem. There's no guarantee in finite godism of victory over evil. Because in finite godism, God's power is limited, God's knowledge is limited, and God's goodness is limited. Since he is not infinitely good, infinitely powerful, infinitely knowledgeable, well, the victory over evil is not guaranteed, which in that sense, it would make evil more ultimate than good. And of course, that's unacceptable on an existential daily basis. So that's another problem with finite godism. And of course, if evil was superior to quote-unquote God, if anything was superior to this God, well, then it's not really God as classically defined. How about atheism? Of course, in theism, God exists. And in atheism, no God exists. Problem. There is no evidence for atheism. There is no positive evidence for atheism. And of course, like someone would say, as we've mentioned in our past episodes, evil is the best argument that atheists have. The logical problem of evil, in other words, that the existence of evil is logically incompatible with the existence of God, has been wiped off the table. Atheists do not use this anymore if they are in the know, if they've done their research and doing their reading. Alvin Plantinga with the free will defense has demolished that. It is not logically incompatible. Now it's been redefined as it's improbable. So this is now called the probabilistic problem of evil. That there is such a great quantity of evil and suffering in the world, it's unlikely that the classical God exists of theism. Not impossible, because logically there's no problem there, but it's unlikely, they say. But evil presupposes God, because of course evil is appealing to some standard, and a violation of that standard, of course, would be then evil. But the ultimate metaphysical standard for good is God. And so evil presupposes God's existence, and there really is no positive evidence for atheism. It's an absolute claim to knowledge that there is absolutely no God, and they shoulder tremendous burden of proof as they say that. Again, don't let someone mislead you or themselves be confused by saying that atheism is simply a lack of belief in any God. It's not true. It's a positive truth claim. It is a positive claim to knowledge that must be defended by the person who holds it, and they are assuming the burden of proof if they are an atheist. So that's a problem. There's no positive evidence really for atheism. Evil is the best shot they have, and it's not a good argument. We have about 13 good answers to the problem of evil. Some of them have already been addressed on our website, and in the future we're going to address all 13 answers intellectually to the problem of evil and how Christian Theism answers that, and it's the only worldview that answers it completely. So that's a problem for atheism. There's no evidence for it. Number two, there is strong evidence against it. As we've done in other videos, encourage you to go through our website, intelligentfaith315.com, and of course, Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Norman Geisler, their websites. There's strong evidence against it as you look at the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and the moral arguments for God's existence. So the cosmological argument, speaking about the origin of the cosmos and the existence of the cosmos, pointing back to God's existence, being this tremendous clue that points us back to the creator of the cosmos. Whether you look at Thomas Aquinas' cosmological argument from motion, Leibniz's cosmological argument from contingency, or the Kalam cosmological argument, which was made popular by Bonaventure and Al-Ghazali, but today is made popular by William Lane Craig. But many cosmological arguments demonstrate that God exists. One form, the Kalam, is simply this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So that's very strong evidence, and it's supported by 5 ways of science and 2 philosophical supports. The cosmological argument is very impressive evidence for God's existence. Number 2, the teleological argument, or the design argument, telos is the Greek word for purpose or design, is also very strong evidence for God's existence. The teleological argument would basically go something like this, that great design shows there's a designer, the universe exhibits great design, therefore there is a great designer of the universe. You can demonstrate this on the cosmic level by looking at the physical constants of nature, forces of nature that when we assign mathematical value to them, they are precisely fine-tuned to millions and millions of a degree, and there's about 30 of these finely tuned constants. They have to be at the precise level that they are at individually, but also collectively in ratio to one another. So universal fine-tuning in the physical mathematical constants of nature is incredibly strong evidence. Also, there is what we could call terrestrial fine-tuning. There's about 25 or 30 design characteristics of the planet Earth: our proximity to the sun, the composition of the Earth's crust, our ozone layer, the magnetic field, etc. And this is also called the anthropic principle. Okay? So this is terrestrial fine-tuning, that the conditions for life upon the earth have been exquisitely finely tuned for a complex life to exist. So the teleological argument, whether you take it at the cosmic level or the terrestrial level, or you could even say at the biological level, you look at incredible creatures and human beings that defy any kind of an evolutionary or naturalistic explanation, and they betray incredible amounts of intelligent design. Whether you're looking at the brain or the eye or the 11 systems of our body, which are interdependent and codependent upon each other, and each of these 11 major systems of the body, such as the digestive system, the visual system, the respiratory system, each of these 11 systems has further subsystems which all have to be online and functioning properly for life to happen. So you can also look at it at the biological level, but not just the cosmic level, the terrestrial level, the biological level, but also at the informational level. Because at its core, really, what they would call the holy grail of design sciences today is the DNA molecule and information science. Because the DNA molecule and then the language that is in DNA, it's not like a language, it is a language, is probably the best single object you could use to show intelligent design or telos, or purpose in the universe. Whether you're looking at the hardware, which is the DNA molecule itself, or whether you're looking at the software, which is the language which we see by the 4 nucleotide bases in the DNA molecule. So we are at a stage today, whether you're looking at it on the informational level, the biological level, the terrestrial level, or the cosmic level, where the teleological argument has more force today than at any other time, I think, in history. Because we have such technology today that we can look inside living systems and deeper into the cosmos than ever before. And all of this is telling us that the deeper and deeper we go, life is very intricately designed, and it betrays a tremendous amount of engineering and architecture behind it. So there is strong evidence against atheism because the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and finally the moral argument give us very strong evidence for God's existence. The moral argument, one of their versions would go something like this, that if God doesn't exist, objective morality doesn't exist. Number 2, but objective morality does exist, therefore God exists. And so objective morality is simply something that is always wrong for all people at all times in all places. And we can agree that there's at least one thing, even if it's only one thing, but this would prove God's existence, that is always wrong for all people at all times and all places. And I could tell you what that would be. Eating and torturing little babies for fun is always wrong for all people at all times and in all places. And the only thing, metaphysically, that is sufficient to ground objective moral values and duties is God. Any kind of a evolutionary or scientific explanation, any kind of a physical explanation simply will not do, because of course morality is immaterial, it's ethical. And so you need a metaphysical explanation. So, as you take all of these 3 arguments together, the cosmological, teleological, and moral arguments together, there is tremendous evidence for God's existence. Add to that list the conceptual argument, the historical argument for God's existence based upon the documents and the archaeology of the New Testament, and the historical facts surrounding the man, Jesus of Nazareth, and you have an incredibly strong argument, a cumulative case for the existence of the classical theistic biblical God. So, huge problems with atheism right there. Theism versus pantheism. Again, in theism, God made all, but in pantheism, God is all. In theism, we would say, I am not God. I, as a human, I am not God. But in pantheism, they would say, I am God. Shirley MacLaine stands on the beach very famously, and she says, I am God. She's realized her own personal divinity. In theism, evil is real, but in pantheism, evil isn't real. And in theism, the physical is real, and in pantheism, the physical is illusory. It's an illusion. Morality exists in theism. Morality is an illusion in pantheism. And theism, logic is grounded, and in pantheism, logic is ungrounded. So, again, vastly different worldviews. They cannot both be true, and the only way to decide it, of course, is to investigate it and to examine it issue by issue and see which one would come out on top and be more rational and more acceptable. So, problems with pantheism, number 1, it denies sense experience. Okay? Yet it uses it to find and share truth. So this is hypocritical. This is kind of logically contradictory. Pantheism says that your sense experience, the information you get about reality with your 5 senses, isn't true. It's just an illusion. But yet it uses sense experience to find truth and to share truth. So that's a contradiction there. Number 2, it claims that we can change from illusion to enlightenment. So number 1, we can change in pantheism. Number 2, we are God in pantheism. But C, yet God cannot change in his essential nature logically. So that also is a big intellectual problem with pantheism. God cannot change. Number 3, pantheism recognizes the existence of opposing views that are equally true, yet it claims they are an illusion. So it's really interesting here. They're talking intellectually kind of out of both sides of their brain. So they recognize the existence of opposing views. In other words, in pantheism and Hinduism and the New Age, all religions, all views are true. There are many roads that lead to God. All of it is acceptable, etc. But yet it claims that they are all an illusion. And so they cannot both. How could everything be true at the same time? But yet they also say, well, Buddhism actually isn't true. It's an illusion. Reality, according to Christians, isn't true. It's an illusion. So they're claiming that opposing views are equally true and exist, but yet all of them are an illusion. So huge intellectual contradictory problems here with pantheism, Hinduism, and the New Age. Polytheism. In theism, we say there is one infinite God. In polytheism, there are many finite gods. Problems. Number one, every finite needs an infinite cause. So, in other words, polytheistic gods need a creator. So one of the huge problems in finite godism is that if it was really a god, well, it wouldn't need anything. But a finite God needs an infinite creator. So what they would call God wouldn't really be God because he wouldn't be uncaused. He would himself need a cause. Problem number two, a universe needs a unicause. This is the anthropic principle. So there's no reason to multiply causes beyond necessity. This is also known as Occam's razor. And so if we have a universe out of the many one, then it would seem to make sense and to bear reason that we would only need one cause. So that's another problem with polytheism. Theism versus panentheism. In theism, God is monopolar, and in panentheism, he is bipolar, literally bipolar. A negative evil side and a good side, and he's constantly changing. In theism, God has no parts. He is a simple being. In panentheism, he has many parts because he is in the world and changing and developing with the world. In theism, God is infinite, but in panentheism, he is finite, which, of course, is a problem. If he is finite, he, of course, would need an infinite cause again. In theism, God is independent. In panentheism, God is dependent. What would he be dependent upon? Well, he would be dependent upon an actual God, which the panentheistic God would not be God. In theism, God is absolutely perfect. In panentheism, he is not perfect, and therefore, by definition, could not be God. And in theism, of course, God is unchanging, he is immutable in his essential nature, but in panentheism, he is changing. So huge problems with panentheism. Some other problems here. Number one, God is self-caused, which is impossible. You cannot be self-caused. This is logically contradictory. It's logically incoherent. It's nonsense. Something cannot exist before it exists to bring itself into existence. And so whether someone believes that about a panentheistic God or about the universe itself, as some atheists do, being self-caused is impossible and it's illogical. Number two, God and the world are mutually dependent upon each other, which is impossible. Unless the world itself were eternal and uncaused, etc., that wouldn't be possible. And again, if God is dependent, he's not God. Number three, God is changing, which is not possible without an unchanging basis for change, which would be more ultimate than God. You cannot measure change unless there's a standard, an unchanging standard to measure it to. That standard would be more ultimate than the changing God, which would make him not God. And number four, God is not perfect in panentheism, which demands a capital P perfect by which he is measured. And so, as we see here, we can just logically, philosophically analyze these worldviews, and they begin to fall short. If you imagine a table that has 4 legs, most of these worldviews, really all of them, except a classical Christian theism, really don't have many legs to stand on. And so just like a table would fall as you begin to kick out some of the legs, these worldviews begin to fall once you begin to analyze them, philosophically and intellectually. So this is what we can do for people as we talk with them in dialogue, is help them understand the weaknesses of their worldview, and hopefully they will be consistent and smart and try to leave that one behind in favor of another stronger worldview. And the strongest intellectually and rationally is Christian theism. So those are some of the problems with panentheism. And some other ones, their concept of change is incoherent because there is no continuity in the change. It is change without anything that changes, and it is annihilation or recreation without a creator. And also, in panentheism, number 6, if God is temporal, he must have a beginning, which he wouldn't be God. He must be material, which he wouldn't be God. And he must be running down, second law of thermodynamics here. And also, he wouldn't be able to think faster than light if he was temporal. So, as you can see here on the bottom, the panentheistic God is a finite creature in need of an infinite creator. So, panentheism just really falls by the wayside intellectually. So, we'll just end with this last scripture, Psalm 145, verses 1 through 3. The psalmist says, I will exalt you, my God and King, and I will praise your name forever and ever. I will praise you every day. Yes, I will praise you forever. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure his greatness. And again, thinking about the Christian theistic God, he is infinitely great, infinitely powerful, infinitely knowledgeable, and so his greatness is infinite and unlimited. And so this is not just an emotional declaration by the psalmist, but as you intellectually analyze Christian theism as compared with atheism, polytheism, deism, panentheism, you quickly discover that Christian theism really is the only strong and robust, intellectually trustworthy worldview. So, think worldviewishly, understand what a worldview is, understand the strengths of Christian theism as compared with the other ones. And then when you talk with your friends, your buddies, your loved ones, help them lovingly, patiently, gently understand the weaknesses of their worldview, and hopefully they will jettison that worldview in favor of a better one, a stronger one, Christian theism. So we'll see you next time as we continue. Come back and join us for Reason to Believe. Until then, have an intelligent family.